It is 6:30, and thanks everybody for coming in. We actually have a really good discussion plan for today, which we'll get to in just a little bit. So to start everything off, just some administrative items. So first things first, we have the agenda which was sent out to everyone, and there's one modification I'd like to request that we make just for consistency for other topics that we do this periodically. It's the public outreach section where we talk about the summary of past efforts and results in the subcommittee report. I'd like to entertain a motion to make that committee only, such that it would basically receive the asterisk in the agenda. It was omitted accidentally, and so I'd like to have it put back if possible, please. So could I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Okay, thanks, Colette. Is there a second? Okay, thanks, Sandy.
Second.
Yeah, Sandy beat you to it, Brenda. Gotta be faster on the draw. Okay, any discussion about the move to turn the public outreach section to be consistent with our previous public outreach sections to be committee only? Okay, hearing none. Any objection to the modification to the agenda? All right, seeing no objection. And then as well, if you could make sure you turn your cameras on so we can verify that it is you whenever you join in, please, because I'll get to that in just 1 minute as to why, but it's important that we actually have video confirmation that it is you when you join in, because we recognize that on Zoom, technically it is possible for somebody to just put your name in on Zoom and they could join as you if you joined in through the normal meeting instead of the committee link. And so we realize we need to actually do that validation. All right. Where was I? Oh, the agenda. Okay, so now we are at the amended agenda. Does anybody else have any modifications to the agenda they would like to make? Okay, hearing none. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, Colette, is there a second?
Second.
Hey, Eric, thank you. All right, any other further discussion? Okay, objection to approving the agenda as it's amended. Okay, without objection, the agenda is approved. Okay, next we have our minutes from our last meeting, the February 20th meeting notes. They were sent out to the committee ahead of time. Does anyone have any modifications to the minutes they would like to suggest? Okay, seeing none, could I get a motion to approve the minutes for our February 20th meeting?
I make a motion that the minutes be approved.
Okay, thanks, Brenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. All right, any objection to the approval of the minutes for the February 20th meeting? Seeing no objection, our minutes for our last meeting are approved. Okay, thank you, everybody. All right, so as I mentioned, we have a pretty good, exciting agenda today. I know this is something that we've asked for different times, and finally, we really appreciate the fort and the county for helping to make it happen. We have Colonel Sapp here, who's the garrison commander for Fort Meade, and we have Chad Jones, one of our ex officio members from the fort, and so we're very excited to hear about where Fort Meade is going and what the plans are. So without further ado, Colonel Sapp, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, the video made it, and I want Chad to know that I got the Fort Meade logo behind me. It's just so big you can't see George Jeet on it. Let's see here. Now the next step, let me project the slides. I do see I have permission for screen share. Thank you. And if everyone will bear with me as I project, just to make sure you see the U.S. Army with all the photos, correct?
Works for me.
Yep, sorry, because it projected. Now I don't see everybody's face. And then if I go to my notes, you don't see my notes, correct?
Correct. It looks like we're seeing the slides.
Okay. The notes are handy, but I'm sure they're not nearly as entertaining. I appreciate the invite, Mark. Thank you for getting this set up and for getting that. I ended up double registering because I missed your 12 o'clock email with my specific link. So there may be two Michael Sapps logged in here. But I'll start with when I logged in, which you all saw, because I don't want to take anything for granted, that Fort George G. Meade Garrison Commander, Colonel Michael Sapp, a whole lot of words. I didn't know what a garrison commander was until I took the job, and that's pretty common for how the Army raises us versus what they need at the time we get the calling. But the garrison commander is kind of like being the city manager of Fort Meade. And in most cases, there is a general officer who is the mayor of the base. And so the city manager is in charge of all the resources, the public works, the child cares, and the security guards, fire department, et cetera. But it's the general that gets to be the mayor who kisses the babies and makes partnerships happen. Well, because of one of the many uniquenesses we have here in the capital region, our senior commander is in DC, and he has 4 Army bases that he's responsible for. And so he has delegated most of those authorities to us, which is why I was so fortunate to get selected Fort Meade for this command. The second aspect of what makes this fantastic for me is this is my 3rd time. So I lived in Odenton twice before. My wife joined the agency in 2010. I'm an intel officer in and out. This is the mothership, and so we continue to keep coming back. And although the Army will send me off on another great adventure after I finish up here with my 2-year assignment, I know I'm coming back. And so everything I do isn't just because the Army told me I'm responsible. It's because this is my second home. Now, for those that hadn't seen my bio, I'm a Kansas boy by birth, born and bred. And so I will always carry that, and I may be Kansan until the day I die, even if I don't live in the state again for more than a day or two on the weekend. But Maryland is absolutely my second home. And so I'm really honored to be able to speak to you all. As I mentioned, my kids grew up in Odenton. We're in 4 Seasons School District the first time, living over in Piney Orchard. We went a little farther south, and we were in the Piney Orchard District the second time. So we know how important Odenton is to Fort Meade. I was here in 2010 when I can never remember which section of which is Waugh Chapel, but as that second half of Waugh Chapel area built up, and we were excited because we knew a target was coming. And we came back the second time in 2015, and we're so excited to see it there. Similarly, when we were here the second time, because of school schedules and my wife and I working, we used wheels as our before and after care. And the fact that our kids could roller skate before and after school and burn that energy on top of doing homework. What a fantastic institution that we happen to have access to here. And it created a passion that they continue now into their teenage and college years. And then some of the other things that we had the fortune to see grow up, right, is the town center. And then having something that's close to the fort, close to the MARC station. So at the end of the day, when someone if they're taking the train in and they need to decompress, they can stop off I don't do coffee, so this doesn't roll off my tongue the same way. But I know the Baltimore coffee and tea is there. Of course, Ruth's Chris, I can only afford it for an anniversary, but it is a wonderful place to spend time. And all the latest growth that I'm not familiar with Shipley's. I've spent enough time in the South. I probably should have. But what I know is the Fort Meade social media networks were alive and well as the Shipley Donuts was about to open, and the excitement that was coming up here. And so I love to see the growth that I've seen over these years, and then getting to be as a garrison commander, mayor type duty, to have the opportunity to really be part of the community and see it at this level is phenomenal. And so no one will ever ask me to drop a hockey puck again. So when I'm back at the Maryland Black Bears, I'll be sitting and buying my tickets like everyone else. So thank you. Truly, this is amazing on a personal level, not just as in the role of garrison commander. So I know part of the reason I'm here to talk is the fort. And so if at any point I do say something that doesn't make sense, please don't hesitate to ring in and ask the question. It won't throw me off my groove. And I'd rather not take for granted what people understand and continue throwing out acronyms or terms that don't make sense. But for those that don't know, Fort George G. Meade has been here since 1917. And when you see this slide, it's a reflection of the multitude of missions and personnel that are here. So we use the expression from saddles to cyberspace. This was big for the 100th anniversary in 2017 that we came to this realization. Fort Meade started because of the railroad station that went through, which at one point was going to be Maryland 32 before they adjusted where that is. But it could bring in the troops, get quick access in, drop them off for training, get them ready to go off to World War I, and then head out there to head over across the pond. And with Fort Meade, one of our first residence commanders, 79th Infantry Division CG, General Joseph Kuhn, was here. And on my desk is the yearbook for his division that they created after the training before they went off and fought in the Meuse-Argonne. So that proud lineage continues with the idea of war fighting 100 years later. And what we see is the cutting edge technology of war fighting in the 20s, the tank that all these infantrymen discovered that they hated or loved, depending on which side of the fence you were on. And that tank warfare was brought back here. So then in the 20s, in the interwar period, you had Patton and Eisenhower teaching the Army and creating the doctrine for this new form of warfighting. You continue on through the Cold War and the growth of intelligence, and how the highlight of spying was certainly during the Cold War with the communism versus capitalism, Soviet Union versus America. And of course, the National Security Agency stands up. On top of that, you even have the nuclear potential, and we had our own Nike missile control facility that was here at Fort Meade. And then the most recent version of warfighting is cyber and the space environment and the cyber domain. And so 2009, U.S. Cyber Command came here, became a 4-star level combatant command. And then 2022, we had our first Space Force unit that was activated. And so now what that means is Fort Meade has Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, and Space Force Guardians all fighting the adversaries every day from here in information intelligence and cyber domains. And by the way, if you haven't had a chance, check out some of the cyber patches and emblems, because they are every bit as sci-fi as you would hope them to be. My favorite is the turtle satellite dish with lasers shooting out its eyes. So what we have, as you look at George G. Meade, in about the 20 years, so as I mentioned, 2010 was the first time I was here. I came here actually as a student going to University of Maryland. We just lived close to Fort Meade as the closest Army base. But when I came in looking to the base's fence line. I was looking for a few services, right? I wanted to use the bowling alley, go to the grocery store, and get gas that was just a little bit cheaper. But for the most part, I didn't understand what it was. When I was here the second time working on the other side of the fence line in the No Such Agency, that it was the same thing. I'm in this compound and I really don't understand. So now that I come on this side, I recognize just how much is here. About 20 years ago, we were about 35,000, 40,000 people. We've grown to 65,000 people, and those numbers continue. That 65,000 is all 6 services. It's active Guard and Reserve elements. We have Maryland National Guard within our fence lines and our borders for the civil support team. We have an Army Reserve Center on Fort Meade, but it's predominantly Department of Defense and joint level. So out of that 65,000 federal workforce, 33,000 civilian, most of which are for Department of Defense, not just the Navy, Air Force, et cetera. And it's not just the NSA. So everybody knows our biggest mission partner of the agency, but the agency makes a little less. It's about 40%, a little less than half of our total workforce. As we look at some of the others, the military is about 17,000. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot is we as leaders or people like me who have just been in the Army for a minute, talk about the idea of a military town, or what a military community means. And of course, you have, for anyone that's spent time in some of the southern areas, especially, or like in Kansas, when one community may be 20 miles away from the next one, it's pretty easy because there is a fort and there is a town. And so they are mutually beneficial. We have the similar relationship. There's actually absolutely a mutual benefit to the income and the economic impact, as well as the people and experience and everything that comes with just having a professional workforce with stable income and stable growth opportunities that helps a community. But we come from all over, people live all over and come into the fort with that many personnel. And so one of the things that we look at is we don't have a military town, we have a military community, we have a county. But I will say the crux of it tends to be in Odenton because of the proximity, because of the great housing boom, and because a lot of the schools that people are attracted to in there. And so we appreciate that all the opportunities that have been springing up, and even some of the recent growth that we see along Maryland, just right outside Maryland 175, but as you cross over that 32 pass when it gets into the Odenton community. So part of we use the phrase continued growth because even though we're at 65K and that it's doubled in size over a few decades, it hasn't stopped. And so we still look at these numbers and where we can fit them, and then what services they can provide on the base or off the base. So as we talk economic impact, the state of Maryland has its economic impact survey. And then what's important to recognize is when this comes out, they ask us for numbers, and so we provide it, but the calculus, the questions is all the state. And based on what they're saying, Fort Meade is tied to over $10 billion in wages alone for those 65,000 people. Then there are some of the other things that just come along with being adjacent to a military base and federal funding. As I'm sure many of you are well aware, the schools do those federal surveys because that brings in extra money to individual schools. But sometimes we have opportunities for grants and programs. One of the ones that I get excited about as having 3 school-age kids is that Meade High. And if you haven't had a chance to see it, it's kind of behind the fence line. But from a distance, you can tell something's going on, that there over the last 2 years, there's been $120 million worth of infrastructure work that's going on. The high school is essentially being built new, minus the gymnasium and the auditorium. Of that $120 million, over $100 million of it came from a federal grant by the Defense Infrastructure Program. And so it's a fantastic way that they recognize that there's an impact on our military dependents and students, but also what is good for the community is good for the military family members. We want Odenton, we want the schools to be the place that military personnel look at and say, I want to PCS, sorry, that's our term for moving, but I want to get orders and assign to Fort Meade. Not because of the jobs there, but because my family wants to live there, because that's the ultimate goal. It's about retaining and recruiting all of those special cutting edge technology, information, cyber, and intelligence professionals that we need them to be happy with their family situation here and their personal quality of life here in order to be happy and to stay in uniform. Because at the end of the day, while we can hire a lot of contractors, it has to be an active duty service member at a keyboard hitting the enter key when you're talking about firing virtual bullets. And that's all part of the Geneva Convention, no different than armed with a gun. In fact, it's just kind of one of those funny things you don't think about as a soldier who goes to work to attack a server somewhere around the world has to do it in uniform, because by Geneva Conventions, we got to be uniformed military. And so some of the other things that we see here is just that by the numbers, to recognize that it is a city. So in addition to the 65,000 people working, we have about 2,600 family homes. That equates to about 10,000 people that live inside the fence line. Correction. We have a small housing community on the east side of 175. So on Fort Meade property, about 10,000 family members. There's also about 1,000 soldiers that live in barracks. There's about 1,000 people that live as bachelors, single individuals in an apartment complex that we have. And then, of course, we have childcare facilities and 3 churches, 2 gas stations, and some of those other things. And then as we shift to the right a little bit, that I won't go into the details on this, but what I like to highlight is the vision. So Fort Meade is a proud owner of all of these things. We are also a victim of our own success. And by that, I mean, there are only about 4,500 active duty soldiers on Fort Meade. There are only about 4,000 airmen, about 3,500 sailors. So when the Army as a base looks at how much it needs to support Fort Meade, it sees 5,000 soldiers and about 1,500 Army civilians. And when I try to say, hey, we have 65,000, they're like, well, of course, but the NSA takes care of theirs and the Air Force takes care of theirs. And there's some truth to that. But then the Air Force will look and go, no, I don't need to worry about Fort Meade. I only have 3,500 and they're on an Army base. The Navy says very similar things. So it's a constant battle for resources. Part of the challenge when we're communicating is what is power. And so the Army, which makes sense, it's how we've won most of our wars, is with bullets, tanks, helicopters, artillery shells. That recognizing cyber is a different kind of bullet today. And so that we are projecting power from Fort Meade. And the opportunities that you see just above that is the idea of their opportunities to work with the post, to have the relationships where we can work together. We put this slide out for your awareness, just it kind of breaks down. I won't talk to the eaches. It just shows how unique the base is. And of course, now that it's recorded, you'll have some of this that you can go back to and really look into the information. But we are a special place and I love it to death. And this is similarly on that idea of what makes Fort Meade a little unique. And the idea that, well, again, I say I won't take things for granted, and then I do. So I've had more than one conversation with people from the community and honestly from career Department of Defense civilians who never served a day in uniform, but have worked for the defense, that don't even necessarily know the difference between a sergeant and a general. So as you look at these slides, the stars are the level of commands. And so U.S. Cyber Command is a 4-star command position. There is technically a 5-star rank. However, no one has been that rank since World War II, or the immediate aftermath for those that retired after World War II. And so 4-star general, 4-star admiral is the senior most rank in the military. The Eagle that you see there and the rest of them, these are colonels. I am a colonel equivalent commander. And so generally a colonel is in charge of a unit that is somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 personnel. And so depending on what their operation is, it is a good sized business. If you were doing anything on the commercial side of what their scope and responsibilities for. What you see as far as the categories, combatant command is that recent cyber combatant command. There are only a few of those. When General Hawk, who recently took over, when he needs something as a combatant commander, his immediate hire is the Secretary of Defense. Meanwhile, as the National Security Agency, as the NSA hat, same man for both positions. When he needs that, he calls the Director of National Intelligence or gets calls directly from the President's office, depending on what's going on. And so just 2 very important roles and different functions. But you get a lot of these other things that we have to juggle these balls. And so the service components have Navy and Marines, have some very senior individuals here, far more than actually we have for the Army. And so I am very respectful to keep some of my West Point or origin story at a minimum. I know we're in a Navy state, and so I'm willing to say go Army and go Navy. But you see some of the others with the reserve components at a significant footprint, the Coast Guard, the Maryland National Guard, and then even the whole of government. We have EPA, the Department of Veteran Affairs, and Architect of the Capitol. And then finally, nonprofit. When we talk about being connected to the community, we have something that only one other Army installation in the world has, and is a homeless shelter that is on Army property. And so they were able to Catholic Charities leases it. They were able to repurpose some World War II barracks and turn it into by rooms so they could actually take families, not just individuals. So all that goes to show there's a whole lot going on at Fort Meade, and there are a whole lot of ways to be engaged. Anything that we can continue to highlight as far as opportunities to connect some of our skills and resources that you get with Department of Defense or government employees. As I said, there's a level, a frame of reference that comes because literally, I won't say every one of us, because especially if you're not in uniform and you grew up going to the NSA since you were 18, been there for 40 years, I've met a few of those. But for many of us, we've traveled the world, the perspectives are there. We also have learned how to be loyal to anybody, anywhere, anytime. And so wherever we are, that's home, and that's where we want to give it our all. We may still have a piece of our heart back to where we were born and bred, but truly we're all in with each mission. And military tend to get along with anyone because we're told who we're working for. It's not by choice. We don't get to hire. We don't get to fire. Most often it's active duty. And government civilians, if anybody's ever worked for the government, it's hard to hire and fire. So it is one of those things that there are just a lot of advantages to reach out to the fort and to say, hey, we want to be a military town and have those connections. And then, of course, the last part of that is the community's problems and challenges are our problems and challenges. I was here in 2010. When I came back and I saw Maryland 175 widen, it was like a kid on Christmas morning. I didn't know that I could get to post so quickly, because when I lived in Piney Orchard, I could hear the trumpet calls in the morning and it'd still take me 25, 30 minutes to get to work. And so the growth that we see within the community definitely works both ways. And so anything we can do for transportation, schools, childcare, and in spouse employment are opportunities that are mutually beneficial. So with that, I think I've exceeded my 15 minutes. I think I did about 25. Mark, or any one of you could have stopped me, but I'm open to questions if you have anything, please.
Thanks, Colonel. Definitely, we appreciate you taking the time. So I do have a few questions to kick us off. That's okay. So one of the big areas that we heard from Fort Meade, I think probably 2 commanders ago, was basically the question asked is, what does the fort need? Like, what do you want to see in Odenton? What don't you want to see in Odenton? And so on the last time it was you wanted to see more childcare, and you didn't want to see more storage units. And so one of the questions I'd have for you is your thoughts. Like, what do you want to see and what don't you want to see?
So honestly, I was surprised to hear storage units, because truly that's never come up. So I would say, yes, that still makes sense. We don't need more storage units. Affordable quality housing gets put out a lot. And I know there's housing being built in different areas. That is something everybody needs. Part of the challenge we have is a lot of our workforce end up living, they do get a housing allowance. And so you can go online and see what every rank is going to get in housing allowance. But a lot of people do end up living in Pasadena so that they can get affordable housing, and then they make the commute. The longer their drive is here, the less they're connected to the mission and the people in it. So the more affordable quality housing that is in the immediate area, the more that they can actually bond as a team and be a war fighting unit. And so that is always there. Childcare is a challenge for everyone. As I mentioned, you probably saw it, it has 8 childcare facilities listed there. I have 3 that are open right now because of renovations, and I can't man them. What we need are people. But I'd say that because I'm preaching to the choir, because everybody is having a hard time finding people. Some of it is getting people that want to commit. Some of it's not realizing that it is a everyday job from 9 to 5. Well, in our case, it's 7:30 to 4:30, but so just everything we can do to help share that message of Fort Meade is hiring, whether we're looking for engineers, We're looking for people that understand systems analysis and data analytics. But we're looking for people who want to flip burgers. We're looking for people who want to work a bar. And so and then of course, just to be in rooms with children. So if outside the post, it's the same thing. If you've got childcare facilities, because what ends up happening is we get a lot of dual military and a lot of single military. And so the day that they show up and they can't get straight into childcare now, that they're swapping, they're calling in, they're trying to telework on a job that's usually classified. So there's not much they can do. And then the other thing I would, so now this is Michael Sapp, who's been in and out of Odenton 3 times with about 8 years over the time. Things like military discounts are great. I'm sure that comes up every once in a while. I would love to see military discounts in communities, and we do. And we can actually help advertise some of that. It's not advertisement. We're giving a list of businesses that do it. But one of the things that I realized I never saw here that I see at every other base is Fort Meade, we love you. Just even a simple banner and sign. So when a service member or a Department of Defense official goes into Baltimore Coffee and Tea or stops at the Dairy Queen on 175 or the Five Guys and goes, oh, I feel like I'm part of the community. It doesn't even need to be about the discount. It's just that relationship. Because I think that's part of what makes people think this is a place I want to stay or not. With our population, every one of our Air Force soldiers go through Lackland Air Force Base and Joint Base San Antonio. And so I get their perspective. That is an extreme version. In fact, San Antonio called themselves about 10 years ago, Military City, USA. So sometimes it's the perspective because they get used to something like that and come up to the Northeast where we're talking about a conglomerate. But those are the kind of things too. It's not just the services, but that recognition of a feeling of community that we are in it together.
That's great feedback. Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone else from the committee?
Yeah, I have a question. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for your presentation and thank you for your service. My mom is also an Army veteran, so I was really excited to have this
Wow.
presentation. I'm curious to understand what kind of amenities or community features you might want to see in the Odenton area. Like the demographics are always shifting, but I feel like there's always that sense of family, the desire to not just live in Odenton, but enjoy Odenton, have places to go in the community. So I'm curious if you've heard on that lens, amenities you'd want to see.
That is an excellent question. I appreciate it. And my public affairs will poke me later for not just bringing it up already. No, the sense of community. So I came in with my 3 C's of care, consideration, community. And the idea was we're not in this alone, even though COVID made us feel like it. And one of the things that I've pushed inside the baseline is to get more community events. And absolutely on the outside, it's areas where we can gather, where we can host opportunities. Severn Center that did a ribbon cutting on the intergenerational center off of Reese Road is a great idea, is a great example of that kind of thing in Severn, where you bring boys club, girls club opportunities with the community with programs. I loved going to Gork Park when I lived over on Sunny Chapel. Because we were at the time that I'd run past and hang out at Gork Park and watch the softball, baseball games out there. That's a nice little area. One of the things that I realized we don't have is or at least if we do, I hadn't seen it, a convention center type of opportunity to have those community events. Now on post, I have I think most people, you've probably had seen the Llewellyn Gate. At one point, it used to be open in the mornings, but there's a great white pavilion that's out there. It's just a piece of white fabric stretched over some metal poles. That's one of the things that was important to me to get fixed after a snow damage. because one of the first events, Red, White, and Blue, was the first event where we had the community come back on base, create those in-gate interactions that just happen as people realize, oh, there are opportunities in the area. But the Massing of Colors is an event that we used to do pre-COVID. We hadn't done it since then, and we're bringing back on May 19th. I'd never heard of a Massing of Colors until this job, but it's every organization that has an American flag and an organizational flag. And so if you've got those two flags and you have people that carry the flags, whether you're a Rotary Club, a VFW, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, American Legion, a church, whatever the case, you have those flags, then the Massing of Colors is an opportunity for each of those organizations represented and all marching to the Army Field Band music and standing at once. And it's this beautiful image of colors and pride. And so those kind of events are what I'm trying to bring back in where there are opportunities that we could help advertise it on our side of Odenton events that are open up to the community to make those connections.
Can I add something?
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to follow up quickly of like, I appreciate you saying that. And I heard a lot of like what you felt like the base could do for the community, but I even also want to think of like what the base is a part of the community. I mean, what the base can offer to like the public civilians, but also I think also what like the town and the county can offer on the other side. I don't know if maybe you've been in one of the public meetings for the Odenton Park, but I know that is expected to have a pavilion. So I think that'll be an exciting side. And just on the fact of as a Army brat, I remember always hearing that kids, and including myself, will talk about how the base is always in the middle of nowhere and there's nothing to do in the surrounding areas. So I'm very much personally invested in not wanting Odenton to not be that case as well. I've heard some folks express it, but I hope that for the military brats on the base and families as well, that they can feel like there are things in Odenton that they can do to be happy here.
Thanks, Abigail. Brenda.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up also on some of the things you said, having the community involved. I was hoping also that some of the military would be involved in some of the things that one of my neighbors do every year. They have this bluegrass thing every year, somewhere around September, October, and every penny that we collect is put back into Fisher House and Fort Meade and all the other Fisher's houses around. And we have raised, I'm sure, and I'm trying to think, the last one was at least $500,000 to give back to Fisher House. So, but we don't see really that many or any of the military come out on that particular day. It's an all-day affair, and I know with bluegrass, it took me a while to get in there. Sometimes I can only last for maybe about 3 hours or 4. But if it's just 15 minutes or 20 minutes to show, especially in uniform, and I know it's always on a Saturday, and it would really be nice to see them.
So my family's pretty country. So I would love me some bluegrass. We actually had the Army Field Band has a 6-string small ensemble that plays the bluegrass and country music too. And what you brought up is exactly. So I wasn't even tracking this as an event, and that's part of the challenge is communicating with all of those stars and birds. No one of them communicates with everybody else.
Right.
And so the garrison tries, we rope it in. But that's one of the challenges we have is just getting that. So us finding out from the community is a perfect way to start because we can at least advertise it. The other thing that I would like to do, and unfortunately my command time is coming to an end in about 4 months, but I'm going to let my successor know that I wanted to get to a point where we had tours of the base. because
Yeah.
I realized, so my 3-star general in charge of me grew up in, Chad would know for sure. I think it was Savage, but it grew up in the area. I know he's born and bred from this area. His mother still lives here, works on my base, so I have to be on good behavior. But he pointed out that his son's girlfriend at some point asked him, well, "What is that music I hear every morning anyway? Who do you have bands play?" And she didn't realize that Reveille was the, "Hey, it's time to wake up and do some PT." She lived her entire life, heard the bugle sounds and hear shooting and just don't know what's actually happening. And so that is one of my goals, is to continue that is the next thing, to try and have engagement where people can come onto base and just even understand what the military base is, so they can take pride in it. It's hard to take pride in something you don't know. Oh, and for those that don't know, Fisher House is the Ronald McDonald House version for militaries. So that's wonderful. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Brenda. Colette.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. I really appreciated that and was very interested to find out so much about the fort that I've been living next to for almost 10 years. My dad is also retired Army, so I'm going to copy Abigail a little bit. After he retired after 20 years, and my brother is currently actively enlisted. He's at Bragg right now. So thank you so much for your service, Colonel Sapp.
Since this is recorded, I'm obligated to say Fort Liberty.
All right.
Thank you.
I have 2 questions, actually. First, I was curious whether the 4th of July celebration is coming back again, because my family actually enjoyed attending with friends every year. And I know for the past few years it has been not happening, and it would be great if it would happen again. So that was the first question. But the second one is really whether and I'm thinking again about what you were talking about, the connections to the community. I mean, as someone who does not go to the fort on a day-to-day basis at all, I don't work on the fort. My husband does not work on the fort. It is very much sort of a little place that is very walled off. We don't really get a chance to explore. And so it is hard to build those connections and feel a sense of community with the fort. I am actually wondering about biking opportunities. And I feel like that might be coming from left field, but we have that wonderful bike path now on 175 right in front of the fort. And there are not a lot of safe places in this area to bike, but I would love to be able to bike onto the fort and ride around. The MPs do a great job of making sure people are driving the speed limit. So it's actually safe, but I don't know whether that is something that A, is even open to the public, or B, if there are facilities and infrastructure on site that would even allow for that.
So a lot to unpack in that one, and I'll try to be concise, but that is not in my nature. I'm sorry to everybody. But so to start, red, white, and blue is what we call our July 4th. Personally, it's driven me nuts, because when I tell people red, white, and blue is coming, they don't know what that means, and so it gets ignored. I'm working that, but they'd called it for 15 years, and so that's hard. But our July 4th last year was the first time we did open it back up to the public. And it was good. We had about 4,000 people come. And for the first time being open to the public, I was happy with that number. We also did not go all out with the band and stage and carnival rides because I'm a little bit of a spinster. But also just we weren't sure what to expect. So we'll continue to see where we can grow. But June 28th, for those that are going to be here, it's on a Friday night, because we do it before everybody goes. And my deputy told me that it was the best fireworks he'd ever seen. And I thought he just had Fort Meade pride. I went this past year, obviously, because I was working. We went to the White House lawn for an event for military for July 4th. And so I saw the DC fireworks on the White House lawn, and absolutely ours blew them away. Just because you are so close to everything is phenomenal. So I really recommend you all get out there if you can. We open up the gate to the public, and then the parking is managed in just a way where it's not free access to the base. So we control that too. So please come on out. As far as the bike paths, I would love to have you come talk at our town hall, because most of our residents would not believe you that our police are good about enforcing the speed limit. We try. But truly, it's actually one of the things we've noticed, that there's that need for our community to Fort Meade, because of the base realignments that happened in the late 90s, early 2000s, has really become a business park. And so we are a whole lot of businesses and not a lot of field and athletics. And so in some ways, it doesn't look like an Army fort just because of how that's shaped out. So there really isn't any, in fact, I'm careful with where my kids bike just to run around and do errands on post. But that being said, I wouldn't open it up because it wouldn't be any safer. In fact, I'd rather bike around the Piney Orchard area of Odenton. But the other thing is that we have a landfill area that's going to be turned into a solar panel farm, and that we're working that as an energy initiative. That's one of the things. I'll put a bug in the ear of our planners, because I think that is a potential opportunity where it's also something that is a little more self-contained as a potential option. We have a bike pedestrian gate, if you didn't know, for those that do have base access, right down the road from the hideaway. And so we get some that will take the mark in and then bike over to base, come in that pedestrian bike gate that we have to get to work. And then they'll stop at the hideaway for a drink before they get on the train again.
Thanks, Colette. Okay, Martin.
Yes, Colonel Sapp, thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your service. I want to continue the discussion a bit on biking, but from a larger perspective of transportation. So those who live off base or want to go off base, do they have a strong need for other transportation modes besides cars, or what do you feel about that?
Absolutely. Commuter traffic, well, it plays both ways. So I'll talk as a installation commander. Commuter traffic and public transit is essential for the area. And we know that people can't work, and you can't improve the economy if they can't get to the work from their home. And in some areas we have a map that was part of I'll go back in the slides. So in the top right corner is our map that we like to show people who aren't familiar to the area, and point out that although Fort Meade is about 20 miles from Baltimore, about 20 miles from Annapolis, and about 25 miles to DC, that those drives are not the same. Now, all roads lead into DC. That's kind of how Maryland has worked out, because that's where the driver is, or into Baltimore. If you want to go east-west across the state, especially public transit, and Chad, he knows the specifics, and I can never remember the 2 points, but it ends up being 2 hours to go the equivalent of 20 miles just because of where it works. So anything that we can do to improve the opportunities for public transportation is good. The problem we have is, and this goes back to, the Army will not fund Fort Meade to have an internal commuter traffic system, because the Army goes, well, it's only 4,500 people. And the Air Force does the same thing. And the Navy does the same thing. And then, of course, each agency, well, I only have 2,000 people. So there's no public transportation opportunity internal to the fence line that the Army or any service will budget the money for it, because there's no demand from any one purse holder. So if there was an opportunity for public transit to get people to the base, we'd have to figure out how we get them to at least enough of the centralized locations within the base. And that's what we saw. We thought this bike gate would draw in more people. And there are a few people that just really love the athleticism, but it didn't get the numbers that we hoped. So that's the other half. As an installation commander, I'd love it, because we're trying to reduce our carbon footprint. We're trying to reduce traffic issues on the highways all around us, and we're trying to reduce the parking issues that we have. But at the same time, I don't think that we can get this horse to drink even if we lead it to the water without really having thought all the way through to the doorsteps.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks for that.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Abigail.
To follow up on Martin's question a bit, I know that the bus, there's a bus that goes sort of like a shuttle right around the Odenton
Yeah, the Odenton Mark
station.
shuttle bus.
Yeah, and then it has some stops on the station. Do you have a gauge on how you feel how many folks on base use the bus or would be interested in the bus? I know in the committee we've talked about when it comes to the public transit, like where there can be some like small investments for big wins of people won't be interested unless the service is better, and service has to be better for people to be interested. It's like a chicken and an egg situation. So I'm curious, from having your idea of folks who are driving into the base, like how they would engage with public transportation.
So just because I've been on the NSA side of things in my jobs too, that's who really gets the most maximum use out of those. And it's well used. But that part of it is because once they're inside the campus, the footprint is small enough that if they're walking, and they have an internal shuttle system because they have enough people inside there. And so that's when we talk about the fort writ large, if you wanted to go to the commissary or the PX, or you worked at garrison headquarters or the public affairs school, we don't have enough stops like that or the centralization. But anything that goes into the NSA campus, because their internal lines of communication are so strong, that those do seem to be well used. And so we could, well, I don't ever want to speak on their behalf because they do have a special place in on our base and in terms of their exclusive use area that they can use. I do know that we could help facilitate conversations if there was interest in more specific data.
Thanks. Just as a side note, I've been really thinking about this Odenton Park that's going to come, of the idea that kids both on and off the base are going to be really interested in wanting to go to the park and how they would get there, and if we had an adequate bus system, like if they would be taking the bus to the park or not. So that's one thing on my mind. And then one other question I had was about the entry points with the base. Like, it looks like there were other points, but they've kind of been closed off. Is there any conversation or idea of why certain entrances were closed off, or really trying to consolidate where people come in and out? Because as the base grows, and then thinking about these high rush hour times, there can often be like bottleneck areas around
Certainly.
Route 32.
So one of the things that my guards hate is that I live on base and my kids go to Glen Burnie. They did the STEM program. Well, my youngest two, my oldest graduated from Meade High last year, but the younger two go to Glen Burnie for STEM. Their drop off and pickup is the Odenton Library. So the guards know that every day I am coming out and in those gates, and I will switch up which gates I go to just to make sure they're doing the right thing, but we're facilitating traffic flow. And the second it backs up to Llewellyn Road, they know they're getting a call to find out exactly why. So that part has really been advantageous for me, at least. But what I've seen, so we have 7 checkpoints officially that are around the base that were a gate at some point. We are provided the manpower for our security guards to do 3 essentially full-time gates. And depending on how we use the labor, we could make 4 gates during rush hour and then close one of the ones down a little sooner in the week and during the days, rather than keeping it open all day. So so there are some things we can do with that, but ultimately it's about 3 gates. So the Army created all of these force protection standards that had to be met with gates. After, of course, 9/11, we didn't have fences. And then it was, okay, we have fences. Now we need to create standoff distance. And for anyone that's seen the gate off of Mapes and 175, how it has this serpentine with special medians and everything else for all security. Of the Rockenbach Gate and Mapes, Mapes 175 are the only two that have been upgraded to meet the new force protection. Mapes 175 is one we're trying to push through Army budgeting right now. Reese and 175 is the other main gate that we have that's been about 2 years going through this construction process. So once that's done, we have to decide where we're going to go, and it's all based on traffic analysts of how do we get people off of 175 is our biggest issue. 32 and 198 creates some challenges. Those two circles I hate. I feel like they're the most dangerous circles in the state, the combination, but it's what we can do to get people off. What I will tell you is the best laid plans are excellent until someone tries to run the gate and we pop a barrier. The second we have to pop a barrier, it doesn't mean they're trying to be a threat, but we get people that don't understand and they get confused. And instead of turning around, they go straight into the gate without access. A single pop-up barrier creates about 10 to 15 minutes without intent, just because now we have to stop everything to search the vehicle and assess it. The other thing is when a security guard has to go to the bathroom and we go from 3 lanes down to 2, I can't stop an adult from needing to use the bathroom, but in that 2 to 3 hour window of rush hour, that bathroom break can actually be the difference between everybody staying off of 175 and then filling that turn lane. So we do continue. So all of that is to say, I hear you. We continue to assess it, but we need the input too. I have the advantage of seeing it every day. So they've had a lot of input and feedback. Chad Jones, as our community liaison in public affairs, he is the one that will get any of the information to us. And he's coordinating with all of the community reps to include our congressional staff reps that work with us too. And so truly he is an absolute treasure to have in your Rolodex to reach out to when those concerns pop up.
Thank you.
Chad.
Yeah. Hey, Abigail, has the community park been cited yet? Because one of the things we do is, so the county executive, Colonel Sapp mentioned the Defense Infrastructure Program. And every year, well, now for our second year, Anne Arundel County has provided us projects that we could sponsor one and help fund. And one of the projects that came up this year was the Odenton Community Park. Has that been cited yet? And has any money gone toward it yet that you know of?
So Mark, I know it's not OPZ. Should we get Rec and Park to reach out to Chad with that full effort? Because the county did put money toward it.
Correct, right. And we are about to start the budget process at county council. So, but yeah, let me put you in touch with Erica Jackson at Department of Recreation Parks.
Okay. Because there are projects and they're mostly in the area. And I guess the only thing I would say on behalf of Colonel Sapp, he can certainly correct me, but you know, Abigail, to your question specifically about amenities, part of that can go our way because Colonel Sapp and every commander does spend adequate time talking with the county about what is needed outside of the installation to support the fort. So those ideas of what you have and projects that you might have available that are funded, those are the type of things that we can then turn around in our discussion and build on. And we can't say do a certain project as much as we can say these amenities that are in this certain project would certainly benefit us.
Yeah.
That's great.
So judging since we don't have a huge amount of time left, but I want to be respectful of your time, Colonel, do you have time for 1 or 2 questions from the public if they have any? Because it's rare they get to ask you directly any questions. So I wanted
Absolutely. Chad
Okay.
knows I eat this up.
Okay, I didn't know what your schedule was. I know you've worked a full day already. But are there any
He will
members of the
stay here
public-
as long as you keep them. So
Are there any members of the public who would like to ask a question? If so, just Mark, if you could provide instructions.
Right. So you should have an option to provide a raise your hand virtually, and then we will patch you in to be a panelist. Okay. So Don,
Don.
yep.
And have to get unmuted. Not a question, but a couple of comments. My wife can attest to the speed enforcement on Fort Meade. I'm a retired Coast Guard, so I'm always happy to see Coast Guard get mentioned and shown in such presentations. I know there are people there. In fact, I think one of my neighbors is stationed there. And I don't know who it wasn't mentioned, being stationed or as a brat somewhere. I also grew up on an Army base, but you know, there's nothing to do. I was stationed in an island just off of New York City. And I was teaching electronics, and one of my classes complained about not having anything to do. So I wrote them a memo back, speaking of all the opportunities that were on the base. And New York City is just a ferry ride away. So don't complain. I got a standing ovation from them. So you want to do something, you can find it. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Don. I see Jerry.
Yes, I'd just like to vouch the fireworks show that you put on last year. I did attend it in person, and yes, I guess whoever was managing the traffic flow and logistics did a fantastic job. There was plenty of parking and traffic was pretty well done. So just want to give my 2 cents on how it was run so effectively last year, and looking forward to whatever additions you were trying to do this year. If that's the case.
I appreciate that. One of the things I love about the fireworks is that you get to hear them twice because it echoes off of everything behind you after it blows up in front.
That's all I have.
And Don, thank you, sir. I was actually my son said he wanted to be in the Army, and I was actually trying to push him to Coast Guard because I think they have some of the best bases, some beautiful locations out there.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Don. Anyone else from the public? Okay, so bring it back. I want to thank you, Colonel Sapp, on behalf of the committee for number one, for returning to Odenton for your third tour, I think you said. So that's actually quite impressive. It means we've made a good impression, and hopefully we get to see you again for a fourth or fifth time, even if you decide to keep coming back to this position.
From your mouth to God's ears.
And so on behalf of the committee, thank you for coming and talking with us, as well as for encouraging Chad and the Public Affairs Office to be part of this committee. We do appreciate it, and really are trying to figure out ways we can have better and deeper partnerships, because I think there's a lot of opportunities, and we really appreciate Chad bringing up all those different opportunities that the base has, and how we should be encouraging the county to take advantage of this partnership. So definitely, I think this raised a couple of items that we need to make sure we continue to push. I liked what you were saying about affordable quality housing. I did want to ask you one quick question on that. What does the word affordable mean to you?
So the beauty of federal government is you can see exactly how much each service member by rank makes in terms of a housing allowance. And so you could even start from there. Now, from a rank population standpoint, using the Army terminology, E for enlisted, O for officers, our officers tend to be in the 03 to 05 range, captain to lieutenant colonel, lieutenant to lieutenant commander for the Navy side, or commander, I guess. And then it's on the enlisted side. We do have some, what we say junior enlisted, those E2 to E4s. But the bulk of our individuals are in the E4 to E7 range. And so just a look of Army BAH will get you that housing allowance rate to see those.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Because I remember whenever we were going through the different committee discussions as well as with the community about what affordable means is a little bit different in terms of other parts of the county, is that there are a lot of individuals who don't meet the county's definition of affordable, but still can't afford to live in Odenton. So Odenton is not affordable to them. And we're not talking about people at the, like your 06s or higher. It's more of your working population that we want to encourage to be in Odenton.
Yeah.
So greatly appreciate that. In terms of the childcare and basically it sounds like a staffing, like just overarching, you're having some of the same staffing issues that everywhere is in terms of like you have positions, you have open billets, you just don't have people to fill them.
Every month we have a hiring fair that we do out at building 1900 near Mead Heights, because that was the old Mead Heights before it became an Army Child Services. But each month, the second Wednesday of the month, hiring event, we get 30 to 40 people walk in. We end up getting about 15 across the finish line, but we're still short about 60 that we need.
So one question I do have, I guess, Stuart, in terms of like the overall like encouragement and work with businesses, is that something that gets advertised through the chamber to get spread across like the county, or is there a communication opportunity here that we're missing?
A lot of the discussion tonight and the issues, a lot of them are Chamber of Commerce issues. And what really happened was several years ago, someone that was just a terrific advocate for Odenton left the chamber. And the other thing that happened was the chamber merged, which used to be with the Laurel Chamber and became the Central Maryland Chamber. When that happened, their board wanted to see more of a regional focus. So the attention that the chamber, local chamber, was giving to Odenton sort of got spread out at that point. They don't have a CEO right now. They're very close to getting one. But there also doesn't seem to be a community champion to put all this stuff together. It's not up to all these committees to be doing so. It's the community reaching out. There's Chad as a resource, and having the colonel here and certainly explaining what the post is about. It is good. There's really not much for us on the post, but we need to provide things off post. And it's good to hear the things that the colonel would like. Affordable housing is a tough one. It is a tough one. And I'd love to sit down with anybody and go over the cost of constructing a unit and just getting a reasonable return for the risk and understanding those economics. So everybody is trying. It's also a lot goes on the builder's fault. Residential builders, they all want to build Class A apartment buildings, and with all these amenities that they think attract people, but in this particular market, they're not as important as the focus needs to be on reducing the amenities to reduce the cost of the rents of these units. But it's tough. I mean, it's just tough. The numbers are tough to do, and it's not that anybody's not trying. So that's just a little snippet. But I think it's a chamber, and I don't think that there's a champion right now for Odenton, and even a community champion who's out there and getting in touch with the chamber. I haven't seen this person. I just haven't. So some communities have them, some don't. You have them within, Seven Oaks and Piney Orchard and all, and maybe that's where it has to come from. They all need to get together and create this vibe that they take into the town center and have events there. But we need this park too. We need a park. We have a library. We need a park next to it. Then there'll be a community focus place for people to feel like there's community. And maybe that's a really good place to celebrate Fort Meade is at that particular park and recognize them as a community member. So thanks for letting me speak. And thanks for everything you do, Colonel. We appreciate it, and good luck with your next mission.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Chad.
Yep. Chad, did you have any thoughts on that?
I just wanted to add one caveat to the childcare and the spaces. Absolutely, the workforce is needed is absolutely correct. But for service member spaces, we have capacity. But as Colonel Sapp showed in his briefing chart, a majority of our population is civilian, which also needs childcare to support that mission. And we don't necessarily have the capacity to handle the service member childcare needs and the civilian workforce childcare needs on the fort. So I just wanted to make that caveat in the space.
Yep, that makes sense. Thanks, Chad. Yeah, and you're right. I think if we put the numbers together, like from what you said, you have roughly 64.5 thousand people in your area, but if you only are supporting approximately 12,000 on base, that's 52,000 people that the county or surrounding counties have, and I think that shows the much wider impact that that you have, and the more we can take those 52,000 and bring them closer to Odenton, the better we are at making sure Odenton is supporting the fort. Okay. Any other final comments or thoughts? That was my summary of our discussion as we were going through. I, of course, wrote down the dates about May 19th and the June 28th event, but I wanted to touch on more of the meat. So, Colonel, any final words?
The last thing I wanted to throw out, this is I will beat the drum about how great Chad is keeping us connected to the community. For you all, he got me booked tomorrow morning for the chamber. And so I will actually be able to work in some of this, because the beauty is the fort gets to be an advocate for all, because everything that is better for everyone is still better for our workforce too, because we are part of the community. But the last thing I did want to show, I had that slide up for a long time, but Chad does fully recognize in his shop when we market and information. So if you follow the Fort George G. Meade official Facebook post, the information we put out is targeting our tenant organizations, but the community around us too. So when there are traffic issues, he will have that up pretty quickly. And then he'll be aggravated with all the right people if it doesn't get out quickly enough, because he knows it's just as important we communicate to everyone around us. So thank you again for the time and attention.
Thank you. We appreciate everything, and good luck tomorrow in terms of your meetings, and we'll let you get home to your family so you can have some time with them. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chad, for helping to get this set up, and thank you as well, Mark, for getting the setup. This is great.
Am I getting kicked out of the meeting?
No, it's more just thanking you for making sure this happened, because it's something that's been well overdue for a long time, and I know it's very difficult to get it lined up, because just military schedules are often not at the whim of the person. The world has a big say in what the military does.
Yeah.
All right, so next on our agenda, we have the public outreach session. So first is the OPZ summary of past efforts and results. So Mark?
Yeah, and again, I'm going to really start from the master plan process. I can start just a little bit before that. Is we use Constant Contact. That's our email platform to get the word out to individuals who have signed up for our, say, e-newsletter, our e-blast. Looking at our numbers today, we have just under 500 contacts on that email list. Again, I could look to see what the open rate is on these emails, but again, I think 500 is a pretty healthy number of individuals that we're reaching. And you can imagine that it was probably a little bit less when we started our master plan process. But then starting with our master plan process, that we actually started March 18th, 2021, so about 3 years ago. We facilitated a community meeting. We put out 2 surveys. Both were online as well as printed and posted in the library. And there was a Dropbox then for individuals to leave their hard copy versions of the survey. That second survey was actually translated into Spanish. Unfortunately, we did not get any responses in Spanish returned to the Office of Planning and Zoning. We then released a preliminary draft of the master plan for people to comment on. There were 2 PAB presentations. And when I say presentations, that includes both the Office of Planning and Zoning making the presentation, but there was also then an opportunity for public comment for each of those 2 presentations or PAB processes. We also we had a booth at Odenton Day. One of those years, I think it was sort of on the tail end of COVID, and that is hosted by the Greater Odenton Improvement Association. During our master plan process, we met with the Maryland Building Industry Association and had very specific meetings with them, as well as the Odenton Action Coalition, the Economic Development Corporation, our housing arm of the government, Bike and Arundel, to get some input on, bike ped facilities that are necessary within the community. We met with Fort Meade, the Heritage Society, as well as the Odenton Volunteer Fire Company. So again, we did quite a bit of outreach, as well as both in person, virtually, and we may not have had the type of results that we would have liked. Sometimes it's hard, and we see this in our other planning efforts throughout the county. Long-range planning is a tough thing for some individuals to get their arms around, because we're planning for 20 years in the future. We're talking about zoning, planned land use. We're using some very wonky terms. We do try to break it down for the public. But if it's not a development where a shovel is going in the ground next door or in close proximity to your house or your favorite shop or what have you, most people don't really have the time to engage with us. They don't have the resources. They don't have the understanding to engage. So like I said, we do understand that despite all these efforts to meet with individual organizations, both in person, virtually, sending out e-newsletters every month, letting people know how to get engaged with some of our Odenton processes and projects. We are always open for suggestions from the public, right? You all are the ones that we're trying to essentially reach. So hearing from you all of, hey, that meeting was at 6:30, I'm working 2 jobs, and I can't attend that meeting at 6:30 in the evening. So let us know, what is the best way to hear from the public and get people engaged? Because again, like I said, even though these are 20-year plans, they do impact you. It's always, when's the best time to plant a tree? Even though you're not going to reap the benefits from it for 20 years, it's really today. So we want to hear from people today. So with that said, again, just wanted to provide that sort of intro about what OPZ has done, just sort of as a lead in then to Jason, if you want to provide a report then on the subcommittee.
Sure. So the subcommittee itself has not yet met to discuss. What I've been doing is mainly prep work such that we will be productive in terms of discussions, because I did not have, I'd say, good clarity in terms of what I was thinking that would happen. So I spent the last month doing that, building out the list of what I thought the focus should be, questions as well as potential ways forward. So I'm looking probably in the next month before our next meeting to be able to provide a readout such that we actually have productive discussion. And so that's where we are with that. I will say, though, that Mark and I did talk a bit about some of the questions the committee had for are there other committees that are like ours, or how do we have letters that like, how does it change with the new master plan? And so we are unique, is what I have been told, is that there's no area like like Odenton Town Center, where there's an advisory committee like us that is doing what we do. Like that's a unique thing. So we don't really have a peer that we can just look at. But number two, one of the thoughts I had that that kind of offsets some of the questions we may have, or we can actually talk about the committee meeting, is to just ask what parts of the Odenton master plan does this development support? Like, make it part of the proposal, so we have a better understanding of the linkage of the development proposal to the master plan. So that way, coming in, we can say, okay, what does the development support? That's a question we can ask up front, as well as, just like we currently do, what are the modifications being requested to the master plan, so we can discuss those individually. So being a little bit more clear up front, so we can understand where there are items that we need to focus on as a committee. And I think those are things that we don't need to talk about in the subcommittee at all. I just wanted to bring them here directly, because I figured that would be an easier discussion with everybody all at once, for how we possibly will be able to link in the new master plan into the proposals. So that's the status I have at this point. So comments, questions, Abigail, I see you have your hand up.
I just put ideas in the chat and thinking about Mark, what you were saying before about community engagement for the future, of ways to allow for more consideration of a wider spectrum of people, and more people, of just thinking about where are the places that people are already just standing around waiting, they're going to most. I know I wasn't here for the plan was already drafted when I was here, so that's why I'm just putting ideas of what you may have done already or other ideas.
Yeah, thank you. We did, that does remind me, we put a couple flyers up at the giant food store, at the Mark station, as well as the B&A trailhead there on Piney Orchard and Odenton Road. There's a kiosk behind glass, I believe. But I do like your other ideas here, and can certainly
Yeah,
look at those in the future.
I know I've seen that kiosk sign at the Odenton station. It looks like it's from straight out the 80s, of so terrible. When I'm talking about signage, I really do mean like giant posters, QR codes. Like, people aren't really looking at flyers, like anything graphic that can get people's attention. And the same with grocery stores. Like, you could put a flyer anywhere, but actually going to a grocery store, doing like survey intercepts, standing there, putting the bright signage stuff, QR code stuff there. Yeah, just ideas. Maybe even like connect with the local school if they like volunteer hours for the city, if you volunteer to like give out the surveys, or talk to people, like, and then that involves like youth. So yeah.
Yeah, and we did try to connect with the Arundel signature program. Their signature program is actually community development. Unfortunately, it didn't work out this time, but I think going through this region plan process, which is completely separate from this Odenton master plan, we are starting to get some ideas of what could work in the schools and how to get them engaged. So I think maybe when we do this update in another 4 or 5 years, we might have some good ideas of how to get students involved.
I'm happy to, if you ever like offhand want any like suggestions or just like a thought, I'm happy to talk more. When I was doing like in the private sector, it was making public engagement plans for these types of efforts. So
Yeah.
I'd be happy to help.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Abigail. Anybody else? Okay, then let's move on to our development project update. Mark, back to you.
Yeah, let me see. Trying to get both the map up as well as the list. I think I might be able to just get the list up for now. Okay. So again, is we try to do these updates quarterly, and this the map and this corresponding list are currently up on the Odenton website. It is aacounty.org/OTC. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see a link for development. And then you'll want to click on development projects. We also do have a list and map for capital projects that we update yearly. So if you do want to follow along, that's where you can find this list. Again, I'm just going to call out the major highlights here since we last discussed this, I think, back in November. So Blue Oaks, from what I understand, construction is underway at that site. This is, again, on Annapolis Road, actually across from Fort Meade, and they are doing 150 units, and it will be workforce housing, so essentially affordable housing. The Starbucks, a catty corner from the Odenton Volunteer Fire Company. They're in their final plan review. That was that next step after sketch plan. So they've gotten advanced a step there. I do want to note that Wawa, I know this is my error, noted that the application has not yet been submitted. That's an error. It has been submitted. So after tonight, if there aren't any other additional changes, I'll make that update and it'll get re-PDF'd up onto the website. Then looking at the Mayfield self-storage facility, this is really up at the top of 170, or near the intersection of Maryland 170 and Maryland 32. It's both an indoor and outdoor self-storage facility. And again, construction is complete on that. There is, there may be, they may come back for some change to the project, but I'm still awaiting some additional information. And then lastly, number 14, the Odenton Health and Technology Campus. Windmark Center, this is along Maryland 175 towards the Dairy Queen side. That project has since terminated. Stuart, you may have some more insight into this, but because I came into the project late, if you do want to elaborate, but again, is that project has since been terminated. So again, those were the major highlights over the past 4 months or so. Happy to answer any questions.
I had a question about the Wawa. It's pretty close to the Exxon station right on that street. So is it for sure a Wawa that would have a gas station or just the store? I see it says gas pumps too, but it seems strange to have just right down the street another gas station.
So again, it is a permitted use, and the property owner is has the right to explore that type of use on their property. And again, Stuart, you might be able to shed some light on this, but I'm sure market studies have been done to help inform what might be the best use for that property.
Correct, and it's been presented to this committee.
Yeah,
and it was approved by this committee. Thank you.
Hey, Mark, do you know what the status of the bike trail is? The bridge over the Tuxet Creek or something there?
Oh, I'd have to go back into our annual report. That's where we would have detailed it. Sam, do you happen to know offhand? I'm not even sure if we included it just because this year, because it is quite a distance from the Odenton Town Center.
Right.
So I don't have that information offhand.
It was supposed to have been finished, I think, in November. It's still not done yet, so I don't know.
Yeah.
What?
Thank you. I actually had a question in terms of the content of the spreadsheet that you sent out. The numbers on in the right column for the bonus program and modification status, are those things that we are able to look up online somewhere in a map? And the reason I'm asking is because in looking through it, it was hard for me to see what had been updated from the last time when we'd gotten this. And so I was trying to figure out if, you know, after a certain number, these are the updates. And so I wasn't sure if it was possible for me to look it up, or if not, if it's possible to maybe, I don't know, highlight the projects that have updates since the last one, just so that it's easier to understand what's actually changed and where there has been movement in the different projects.
Yeah, that's your second point there about identifying or calling out where there have been changes. I can do that for the next iteration of this. And then your first question is where to find this. What I'll do is on the website where we host this, where we host both the list and the map, I can provide 3 links to where you can look up modifications. So I think we have the 3 links are modifications pending, modifications approved, and then time extensions approved. And so I'll just include those 3 links on that site so that it can take you right there. And I'll let the committee know when that has happened, and we can include it in the next newsletter that goes out to the public to let them know that that has since been updated as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Mark, I had a question about the sheets. Do you have any additional insights into what the plan is? Because I see the specimen trees and then the typical sections and streetscape requirements of the parking lot location were denied. Do you have any additional information as to what the plan is there? Because I went back and looked at our letter that we had sent, and the challenge is the site itself. So I'm just kind of curious if there's any feedback or thoughts as to like what how that conversation went, or what's next.
So I think the beauty of what I just mentioned of including those 3 links is the county has now updated not only the status of, say, those modifications or some of these requests for relief, they include the application by the applicant as well as the letter from the county indicating why or why not the relief has been approved or denied. So I don't have the answer to that offhand, but again, that's something that I can then call out to in a follow-up email.
Okay, that'd be great. That teaching us to fish is perfectly fine. So I'm okay with that. Okay, any other comments or thoughts on the development project update? Okay. All right, well, this is good, Mark. Thank you. Thanks for that list. And then I look forward to seeing that link so we can get more insight into what these details are. So again, thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is advocacy and new business. Are there any items anybody would like to bring up for advocacy and new business? Okay, hearing none, that is fine. All right, so then we're at the point of our meeting now where we have general public comment. And so is there anybody from the public who would like to be recognized to speak? So if so, just, raise your hand and Mark will recognize you. So Wiley, go ahead.
Referencing Stuart's comments on someone championing Odenton. Some time ago under County Executive John Gary, there was a position named as the Odenton Town Planner. Michael Fox was the gentleman that was put into that position. Michael retired or left the job, and I was wondering what happened to the position. That was the position that was supposed to be the person that would champion Odenton. So it looks like it's fallen by the wayside if we don't have anyone. And secondly, you mentioned, Mark, the Starbucks. I think you said across from the OVSC, that's going to be in a shopping center, right?
There are 2 Starbucks proposed. One is in the Giant Shopping Center, and the other is on that vacant northeast corner of Baldwin and Maryland
Northeast.
175.
Okay, I got you.
Or
Yep,
northwest, I'm sorry.
got you.
Yep. Going back to that position that you referred to, I believe it ultimately got folded into the Office of Planning and Zoning, Long Range Planning Division, which is Sam and I's division, and Mike Fox, his position was Senior Planner. So he was, I guess it sort of morphed over those years, and he became part of our division and was doing Office of Planning and Zoning work as well. I mean, it's sort of like what my position is now. I do just have a few other responsibilities throughout the county as well.
Okay. Okay, that's it for me. Can you unmute?
Thanks, Wiley. Okay, Jerry.
Yes, it's more of a, I guess, update question, more or less, but has there been any type of progress or, I guess, request made for any type of crosswalks along TCB?
Not that I'm aware of. That was included, though, I think, in the priority letter. And so, again, we can do a quick presentation on this at a later meeting, but the budget process starts in the fall and it goes through various departments, for example, Department of Public Works. These departments then make presentations to the Planning Advisory Board. They then make their recommendations to the county executive, who then presents the budget, I believe, May 1st, I think, is a Saturday this year, I want to say, but or sorry, May 1st is a Wednesday, I believe. And he usually presents it around that time. It goes to council and they make their decision whether a project that gets presented to them gets funded. I don't know where that recommendation for improvements, for pedestrian improvements stand at major intersection within OTC, but we will find out, say, in the next month or so.
That's all I had. Thanks, then.
Okay. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Mark, for that insight. Any other members of the public? Okay, bring it back to the committee. Any final thoughts from the committee? Okay. Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, thanks, Colette. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Any objection to adjourning? This is a great meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Nope.
So,
Thanks, Jason.
seeing no objection, we'll see you next month.